Plets Express, Ralroade Video Productions is proud to present Our program begins in Palmer, Massachusetts at the site of the historic Union Station. The depot was constructed in 1884 and was shared by the Boston and Albany and Central Vermont railroads. The city of Palmer has a population of 14,000 and is located about 90 miles west of Boston. Today, the old passenger station is now home to the popular Steaming Tender restaurant. CSX intermodal train is heading to Boston and is powered by two big 4,400 horsepower Evolution Series GEVOs. Palmer is located at milepost 83 of the CSX Boston subdivision, which is the busiest freight line in New England. Intermodal trains make up about half of CSX traffic through here, with the balance being General Manifest and Autorack trains. During our visit in 2017, the railfan hotspot of Palmer saw train action from four railroads, being the New England Central Railroad, the Massachusetts Central, Amtrak, and CSX. A New England Central Railroad yard job is going to work in the Palmer Yard. Diesel Power is a Genesee and Wyoming 3,000 horsepower GP40 CU that was originally built for the Norfolk and Western in 1967. Second New England Central crew was working the yard with a 3,000 horsepower SD40M-2. This diesel was originally built in 1969 as an SD45 for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, and later saw service on the Burlington Northern, the Chicago and Northwestern, and the Union Pacific. A 2,000 horsepower New England Central GP38 is pulling a cut of cars out of the CSX Palmer interchange track. The New England Central number 3845 was built in 1969 for the Gulf, Mobile, and Ohio, and later saw service on the Illinois Central. The New England Central Railroad had their beginning in 1995 when the Railtex Corporation acquired the Central Vermont Railway, who for many years was a subsidiary of the Canadian National Railway. The New England Central Railroad's main line starts up north with a connection to the Canadian National in Alburgh, Vermont at the U.S.-Canadian border. The New England Central's main line travels 366 miles south through the states of Vermont and Massachusetts to the end of the line at New London, Connecticut. After only 5 years of operation, Railtex sold the New England Central Railroad in the year 2000 to Rail America, a company who operated 45 shortline railroads. Then in 2012, the New England Central Railroad was sold once again, this time going to Genesee and Wyoming, who is the largest operator of shortline railroads in the U.S. An eastbound freight is passing through Palmer, and the train is powered by two CSX 3,000 horsepower GP 40-2s. Both diesels were built by EMD back in 1979 for the Baltimore and Ohio. CSX Transportation is based in Jacksonville, Florida, and operates more than 21,000 route miles that are located in 23 states in the eastern half of the U.S. In Massachusetts, the CSX operates across 430 miles of track and handles approximately 280,000 carloads of traffic per year while serving 150 industries within the state. Three SD 40-2 types are diesel power on a northbound New England Central Railroad train that's departing their Palmer yard. The lead unit is the 2716, which was originally built in 1966 as an SD 40 for the Louisville and Nashville, and later saw service on both the Southern Pacific and Union Pacific. In its early years, Palmer was called the town of 7 railroads, but only 5 were ever operated. The list includes the Boston and Albany, Central Vermont, Springfield, Athol, and Northeastern, Ware River, and the Central Massachusetts. Passenger trains of the Boston and Albany, Central Vermont, and the Ware River use the Palmer Union Station. Soon after departing the yard, a northbound New England Central freight is passing through the north side of Palmer. NECR diesel power today consists of two SD40M-2s, a former Southern Pacific SD40T-2, and a blue and gold GP38, in all combining for 11,000 EMD horsepower. The New England Central Railroad operates their trains across a 383-mile rail system. The tracks include 60 miles in Massachusetts, 61 miles in Connecticut, 134 miles in New Hampshire, and 228 miles in Vermont. Rolling through the New England countryside about 22 miles north of Palmer, the northbound train is now at NECR milepost 90 in Leverett, Massachusetts. Norfolk Southern SD90-43 Mac and an SD70 M-2 are leading Pan Am Southern empty auto-rack train number 287 at Miller Falls, Massachusetts. The tracks to the left are the former Central Vermont Railway. In 2008, the Norfolk Southern and Pan Am Railways joined together as 50-50 owners to create the Pan Am Southern Railway. This line begins in Albany, New York, and travels across Massachusetts going into the Boston Metro. This ex-Boston and Maine route is known as the Patriot Corridor. This train will soon be arriving at the Pan Am Southern's Deerfield Yard. Southbound New England Central train is passing through Miller Falls at NECR milepost 99.6. This train originated earlier today at the New England Central Rail Yard in St. Albans, Vermont. The train was interchanged with the Canadian National at East Albert, Vermont, which is located on the U.S.-Canadian border. Located along the Miller River, the city of Miller Falls has a population of 11,000 and was first settled in 1824. The New England Central trackage begins to elevate here as it parallels the Pan Am Southern line for a short distance through Miller Falls before crossing on an overhead bridge and then continuing south to Palmer. The New England Central Railroad interchanges traffic with 8 railroads, including 4 Class 1s, being the Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, CSX, and the Norfolk Southern, plus 4 short lines and regional railroads, being the Massachusetts Central, Providence and Worcester, Vermont Rail System, and the Pan Am Southern. The 302-mile trip from St. Albans, Vermont is nearly complete, as the southbound train is arriving in Palmer at New England Central milepost 65. The railfan hotspot of Palmer can see up to 20 trains in a 24-hour period. A third railroad serving Palmer is arriving at the CSX interchange. This is the Massachusetts Central Railroad, which began operating in 1979 over a former New York Central and later Penn Central and Conrail branch line that travels 26 miles north to Southbury, Massachusetts. diesel power on the Massachusetts Central Interchange is the MCER number 1751, which is a 2,000 horsepower GP38-2 that was built by EMD in 1972 for the Penn Central as their number 7997. Early morning New England Central crew is working the Palmer Yard with a 3,000 horsepower GP40 CU. New England Central road train is being put together with a 2,000 horsepower blue and gold GP38 AC and a 3,000 horsepower Genesee and Wyoming SD40-2. The busy Palmer Rail Yard is the base of operation for the south end of the New England Central Railroad, and crews for several daily trains are operated out of this yard. Several times each day, the New England Central train crews must cross over the diamond and the tracks of the former Boston and Albany main line while switching cars in their Palmer Yard. Massachusetts Central rosters a couple of these GP38-2s, which handles the bulk of their daily freight activity. With their work in the CSX interchange yard complete, the Massachusetts Central train crew departs Palmer Junction with their new train and is heading north to serve online customers. A couple of out-of-service diesels are in storage, including this rare 1,000 horsepower EMD NW5, which is one of only 13 ever produced. Massachusetts Central number 2100 was built in 1947 for the Southern Railway. Also, a rebuilt GP20 that was originally built as a GP7 for the Milwaukee Road in 1954. We're now at the north end of the Massachusetts Central's 26-mile rail line at Southbury. A short rail spur comes off the Ware River main line and into the Wildwood Reload. This distribution and transload facility is located at the site of an old mill complex and has unloading areas, warehouse buildings, and a large salt shed. The city of Barre has a population of 5,400 and was first settled in 1720 in what was then known as Hutchinson. In 1776, the name was changed in honor of Colonel Isaac Barre, who was a hero in the American Revolution. Southbound road freight from St. Albans, Vermont is arriving in Palmer. The diesel power consists of an SD40-2, a former SP SD40T-2, and a second SD40-2, in all totaling 9,000 horsepower. Some of the main commodities transported by the New England Central Railroad include agricultural products, aggregates, chemicals, automobiles, construction debris, food products, feed ingredients, forest products, minerals, petroleum, scrap, pulp and paper products, and various metal products. On display by the depot in Palmer is an 060 switcher. This steam engine was built in 1915 by the H.K. Porter Works of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and operated at a sand and gravel company in the state of Virginia. Pulling into the New England Central Palmer Yard is a former Providence and Worcester 2,000 horsepower GP38 that was built by EMD in 1969 for the Penn Central as their number 7794. This New England Central job is returning after making an interchange with the CSX. A westbound welded rail train is arriving in Palmer and is powered by two big GEs. The CSX acquired this former Boston and Albany, New York Central, and Penn Central trackage in 1998 when the Conrail system was divided up between the CSX and Norfolk Southern. Today's CSX rail line was originally built through here in 1839 by the Western Railroad. In 1867, it was merged with the Boston and Worcester Railroad to become the Boston and Albany Railroad. Arriving back in Palmer, the Massachusetts Central number 1751 is wearing a very attractive Boston and Maine-inspired bluebird paint scheme of the 1950s. The Massachusetts Central's 26-mile main line going north from Palmer consists of the old Boston and Albany's Ware River branch. The line was constructed way back in 1868 by the Ware River Railroad. Over the years, this route was also operated by Penn Central and Conrail before being sold to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who then leased it to the Massachusetts Central in 1979. New England Central number 3405 is an SD 40-2 that's named in honor of Robert M. Melzer, a Genesee and Wyoming board member with 20 years of stewardship. The NECR train crew is pulling a long cut of cars into their rail yard after interchanging traffic with the CSX. The Massachusetts Central is departing the yard with interchange traffic off the CSX and New England Central railroads. Operating on a Monday through Friday schedule, some of the main commodities transported by the Massachusetts Central Railroad include lumber, pipe, plastic pellets, highway salt, construction materials, and various general merchandise. NEC diesel power is being readied for today's southbound road freight to New London. Diesel power on the southbound road train that's departing Palmer consists of lead unit number 3809, which is a 3,000 horsepower GP40 CU, and the trailing unit is number 3039, a 3,000 horsepower GP40-2 LW that was built in 1974 for the Canadian National and now has a Rail America paint scheme. The southbound road freight is now at Munson, Massachusetts, which is located at milepost 61 of the New England Central's Palmer subdivision, which starts at Windsor, Vermont, and travels 170 miles south to reach the Atlantic Ocean port of New London, Connecticut. At New England Central milepost 55.7, we're now at a location known as State Line Hill, which is the border between Massachusetts and Connecticut. Heavy southbound trains departing Palmer must work hard to climb this steep grade on the very scenic State Line Hill. The southbound train goes rolling through the scenic Connecticut countryside near South Willington. In 1995, Railway Age magazine named the New England Central Railroad as their Shortline of the Year. Mid-morning northbound train out of New London is passing through Stafford Springs, Connecticut at NECR milepost 50. Located at the mouth of the Willimantic River, Stafford Springs has a population of 5,000. The northbound freight comes rolling through Orcuts, Connecticut. Now at State Line, diesel power on this train consists of a 2,000 horsepower GP38 AC and followed by a 3,000 horsepower GP40 CU. The northbound freight is passing through a short tunnel and under Highway 32 at Munson, Massachusetts. Originally known as Brimfield when it was first settled in 1715, the town was renamed in 1775 after an Englishman, Sir John Munson. Northbound arrives at the rail yard in Palmer. Freight traffic on the New England Central runs about 37,000 carloads per year across their 383-mile rail system. From here, we'll head up north to Vermont for a look at our next railroad. We're now on the Vermont rail system at Rutland, Vermont. Workers at their two-stall engine house handle fueling and daily servicing of the Vermont Railway's bright red EMD diesel fleet. Train crew goes to work with diesel power for today's Bellow Falls turn job. Rutland is the operational headquarters for the Vermont rail system, with lines branching out of here in a hub and spoke style system. The Vermont rail system has lines going north to Burlington, Vermont, south to a connection with Pan Am at Hoosick Junction, west to a connection with the CP at Whitehall, New York, and east to Bellow Falls, Vermont to a connection with the New England Central and the Pan Am Southern. Diesel power and crew for today's Rutland switch job has just departed the engine house and is ready to go to work. Rutland is the third largest city in Vermont with a population of 16,500. The city of Rutland is located near the center of the state, some 60 miles north of the Massachusetts state line. The city is also situated at the base of Vermont's beautiful Green Mountains, and their trains need plenty of diesel power to climb the 1,000 feet in elevation to reach the summit. South side of Rutland, a lease unit number 2208 is leading today's Vermont Rail System job GMRC number 263, which is the Rutland to Bellow Falls turn job. Over the Green Mountains begins. Today's Vermont rail system essentially travels over the route that was once part of the Rutland Railway. The Rutland has a history that dates all the way back to 1843, and at its peak in 1929 operated across 413 miles of track. The Rutland was also a fan favorite with its large fleet of Elco RS3s. The Rutland lacked major population centers, and business eventually began to decline in the late 1950s, which led to labor unrest and strikes, and by the end of 1961, the Rutland was permanently shut down. Eastbound train is working hard as it crosses Highway 103 and climbs the grade at milepost 47 at East Clarendon. In 1963, the state of Vermont stepped in and purchased the trackage of the Rutland Railway to preserve rail service. The line from Burlington to Rutland and on to North Bennington was leased to the Vermont Railway, and they began operating the line in 1964. This 53-mile line from Rutland to Bellow Falls was leased to the Green Mountain Railroad in 1965 and was later acquired by the Vermont Rail System in 1995. A piece of railroad history is preserved here at the East Wallingford Section House number 14 Museum, which dates back to the late 1890s and is home to a Fairmont motor car. Eastbound train number 263 is now at milepost 40 in East Wallingford. Today's train has two leased GMTX 2,000 horsepower GP 38-2s that were built in 1972 for the Penn Central, plus VTR number 310, which is a 3,000 horsepower GP 40-2 LW and was built in 1976 for the Canadian National. And the trailing unit is VTR number 431, which is a 4,000 horsepower SD70 M-2. Today's Vermont rail system is a combination of 5 separate railroads. The list includes the Vermont Railway, which began in 1964 on ex-Rutland trackage. The Clarendon and Pittsford was acquired in 1972. The former Delaware and Hudson Whitehall branch began in 1983. The Green Mountain Railroad was purchased in 1997. The Washington County Railroad in 1999. And the New York and Ogdenburg Railway in 2002. Another eastbound Rutland to Bellow Falls turn job is climbing the grade through the Green Mountains at milepost 40 near Cuttingsville, Vermont. Diesel power on this train consists of VTR number 207, a 2,000 horsepower GP 38-3 that was originally built in 1969 as a GP 38 for the Southern Railway, and VTR number 432, a 4,000 horsepower SD70 M-2 that was built in 2006 and is still wearing the paint scheme of the Florida East Coast. Eastbound train number 263 is climbing the grade as it passes through East Wallingford. Today's train is also transporting part of Vermont Rail System's passenger car fleet that's used in the seasonal running of the Green Mountain Flyer. The Vermont rail system interchanges traffic with 7 railroads at 6 different locations. The list includes Class 1s, short lines, and regionals, including the Canadian Pacific, CSX, Norfolk Southern, Pan Am Southern, New England Central, Central Maine and Quebec, and the Canadian National via the New England Central. Vermont is known as the Green Mountain State. Its scenic tree-covered peaks and mountain ranges run north and south across the entire length of the state. The Green Mountains actually divide the state into eastern and western sections and gave the early railroads no easy way to cross over. This route was chosen as the best option in the 1840s when the rail line was built by the Rutland and Burlington Railroad, who was the predecessor to the Rutland Railroad. At milepost 40, the train has reached the line summit near Mount Holly, Vermont, which has an elevation of 1,540 feet and is the highest point on the Vermont rail system. The nearby Mount Ludlow rises to an elevation of 3,343 feet, and the Green Mountain's highest peak is located in the northern part of the state at Mount Mansfield, which rises to an elevation of 4,393 feet. Each autumn, the Green Mountains has spectacular fall colors and is very popular with tourists and skiers. At milepost 27 is the city of Ludlow, Vermont. This former Rutland Railroad depot was built in 1887. The passenger station was restored in 1977 as part of the Vermont Bicentennial celebration. Today, this former Rutland Green Mountain route is now the Vermont Rail System's Bellow Falls subdivision, which travels 52 miles from Rutland going southeast to Bellow Falls, Vermont. The Vermont Rail System operates in 3 states on over 350 miles of track. Its rich railroad history consists of segments of 6 fallen flags, including the Rutland, the Delaware and Hudson, the Central Vermont, the Montpelier and Barrie, and the Northwoods and St. Lawrence. At milepost 13.5 of the Bellow Falls sub is the city of Chester, Vermont. The beautiful brick passenger station was built in 1871 after the original 1851 wooden depot was destroyed by a fire. Chester passenger station is used by the seasonal fall excursion trains of the Green Mountain Flyer and is located at the Highway 103 grade crossing. The city of Chester has a population of 3,155 and was known as Flamstead when it was founded in 1754. The name was changed to Chester in 1766 and is named after George Augustus Frederick, the Earl of Chester and the eldest son of King George III. At Brockway Mills, Vermont, the tracks of the Vermont rail system travel over and along the Williams River, which eventually flows into the Connecticut River just north of Bellow Falls. The brick passenger station in Bellow Falls was constructed in 1923 to replace the original 1851 depot. The station was shared with the Central Vermont, the Boston and Maine, and the Rutland Railroads. Next to the depot is an 1880s-era railway express agency that's now home to the offices of the Green Mountain Railroad's tourist operation. Bellow Falls has a population of 3,200 and is located in southern Vermont along the Connecticut River and the western border of New Hampshire. VTR number 311 is a 3,000 horsepower GP40-2 LW that was built in 1976 for the Canadian National. In 2014, the Vermont rail system celebrated its 50th anniversary. The 311 was the first diesel to be painted into their full red paint scheme and also has their special 50th anniversary logo. The Vermont rail system offers two seasonal tourist trains, being the Champlain Valley Flyer and the Green Mountain Flyer. Their passenger fleet ranges from elderly heavyweight equipment to former Santa Fe stainless steel coaches. The business car McIntyre is an 80-foot open platform observation car that was built in 1932 by Bethlehem Steel in Baltimore and operated on the Erie and later Grand Trunk Western. Amtrak southbound Vermonter is arriving midday in Bellow Falls. Amtrak 4,250 horsepower GE P42 DC number 101 is leading the southbound Vermonter through a short tunnel that travels under downtown Bellow Falls. This train is traveling on the New England Central Railroad and is heading for Palmer, Massachusetts. This Vermonter replaced Amtrak's overnight Montrealer in 1995. Back at the station, the crew on the Bellow Falls switcher is arriving back from their nearby Riverside Rail Yard. Bellow Falls is the freight interchange site between the Vermont Rail System, New England Central Railroad, and the Pan Am Southern. Bellow Falls was also once home to Steamtown before they moved to Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1983. With the Riverside Yard interchange complete, the Vermont Rail System number 431, a 4,000 horsepower SD70 M-2, is now leading train 264 on its westbound trip back to Rutland. The train is passing under the Williams Road overpass that's located south of Bartonsville. In 2012, the Vermont Rail System was honored by Railway Age magazine as their Shortline Railroad of the Year. At milepost 14, the westbound train comes rolling through Chester. In August of 2011, Hurricane Irene came blowing across Vermont, causing the worst storm damage in the state's history, including severe damage on the Vermont Rail System's Green Mountain Line. The railroad had to repair over 100 washouts and had major damage on 6 bridges. Amazingly, the railroad was reopened after only 3 weeks of around-the-clock repair. VTR number 431 is one of 2 former Florida East Coast SD70 M-2s that the Vermont rail system acquired in 2017 to help modernize their diesel fleet. The big 4,000 horsepower EMDs are equipped with microprocessor control features that allow these highly efficient locomotives to move greater tonnage over the rail line while consuming less fuel. At Ludlow, the westbound train is working on a steady uphill grade over the Green Mountains. Ludlow is a ski resort area and mining town with several talc mines in the region. GP 38-3 and an SD70 M-2 are leading this westbound train number 264 that's passing through Brockway Mills, Vermont. Some of the main commodities transported by the Vermont rail system include aggregates, limestone slurry, talc, various feeds, salt, grain, coal, and cement. The beautifully preserved passenger station in Chester is of classic brick Norman Romanesque style architecture where all the trim was also done in brick. The Chester Depot is home to the Vermont Rail System's autumn operations of the Green Mountain Flyer as they run fall-color tourist trains out of this historic passenger station. The railroad offers 2 round trips through the Green Mountains. One train goes north to Ludlow and a second one goes south to Rockingham. Near milepost 25, the westbound train is passing through Smithville, Vermont, which is home to the Emery Talc Mill. To supply their processing plant with material, they operate several open-pit mines that are located nearby to the south. Talc is used in numerous products, including paper, paints, plastics, ceramics, rubber, agricultural products, soap, and cosmetics. Trains of the Vermont Rail System serve this plant with covered hoppers. We're now back in Rutland at the Amtrak passenger station that was built in 1999. This Amtrak train is known as the Ethan Allen, and it makes daily round trips between Rutland and New York City. The train departs Rutland in the early morning and arrives back in the evening. The Vermont rail system runs their freight trains to Whitehall during the night so as not to conflict with the schedule of the passenger train. This was once the site of the Rutland Railroad Freight Yard. After their demise in 1963, the yard was redeveloped by the city into a shopping mall. Running on a track behind the mall, a crew on the Vermont rail system is busy switching. This is the Vermont Rail System job RDSW, known as the Rutland Switcher. This job switches out the previous day's traffic from several road freights and locals, along with serving the local industries. Diesel power consists of VTR number 311, a 3,000 horsepower GP40-2 LW, and the 318, a 1,500 horsepower MP15 AC, that was built in 1975 for the Milwaukee Road and later saw service on the Soo Line and Canadian Pacific. Each year, the Vermont rail system transports approximately 25,000 carloads of freight across their 350 miles of track. Of this total, approximately 85% of the traffic originates and terminates within the state of Vermont. On the west side of Rutland is the community of Center Rutland and is also home to the Rutland Railroad Museum. The Center Rutland Passenger Station was constructed in 1912. The depot was built at the junction of the Delaware and Hudson and the Rutland Railroads and served both passenger and freight customers until it closed in the late 1950s. The Depot Museum features artifacts and displays about the railroads in the region, and next to the station is an old Rutland wooden caboose that was built in 1924. While waiting for the train in Pittsford, Vermont, we spotted one of Vermont's many rustic covered bridges. This is the Depot Hill Bridge over Otter Creek that was built way back in the 1840s. Leading this northbound train is VTR number 308, a 3,000 horsepower GP40-2 that was built in 1977 for the Boston and Maine. The white tank cars are used to carry limestone slurry, with much of it destined for the paper mills in Maine. This is Vermont Rail System job FLSW, that's known as the Florence Switcher. This local turn job serves a limestone plant in Florence and makes a round trip to Rutland 6 days per week to swap loads for empties. We're now in North Canaan, Connecticut. This Union Depot was originally built here in 1872 at the crossroads of the Housatonic Railroad and the Connecticut Western Railroad, which later became the Central New England Railroad. A Housatonic Railroad train crew is heading light with today's diesel power for a northbound freight that'll be going north to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. On display next to the depot is an old and historic Maine Central caboose. Housatonic Railroad train NX12 is now put together and is ready to depart North Canaan. The historic three-story Canaan Union Station was built with Victorian-style architecture. The tower at the left end of the station was used by the railroad telegraph operators and was topped with a steam locomotive weather vane. The tower gave the operators a clear view of the railroad below. Sadly, the southern half of this Union Station was destroyed by an arson fire in October of 2001. The Connecticut Railroad Historical Association purchased what was left of the depot in 2003 and began the task of restoring the station back to as close as possible to its original design and appearance. This train is on a 40-mile trip to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where they'll interchange freight cars with the CSX and will also switch industries along the line as needed. A Housatonic switch job goes to work with the 22, which is a 1,500 horsepower GP7U that was built by EMD back in 1952 for the Santa Fe and later saw service on the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad. Northbound freight comes rolling through Sheffield, Massachusetts at Housatonic milepost 54.6. Diesel power on today's train consists of two GP35s that were overhauled by the Housatonic Railroad shops and are now deturbocharged 2,000 horsepower locomotives. The Housatonic GP35s all wear a green and yellow paint scheme, reminiscent of the old Chicago and Northwestern Railroad. In 2017, the Housatonic Railroad rostered 5 2,000-horsepower GP35s. All units were built by EMD between 1964 and 1965 for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and later saw service on the Penn Central and then Conrail before being acquired by the Housatonic. At Housatonic milepost 61, the 3604 is leading the northbound train through Great Barrington, Massachusetts. In 2017, the Housatonic Railroad was operating across 120 miles of former New Haven Railroad trackage. The route begins in Danbury and Derby Junction, Connecticut, and travels north to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. At milepost 79 is the historic passenger station at Lenox, Massachusetts. The depot was built in 1902 by the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad and replaced an earlier depot that was built around 1850 by the Stockbridge and Pittsfield Railroad. The station was placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1989 and today is home to the Berkshire Scenic Railway Museum. After interchanging traffic with the CSX in Pittsfield, the 3601 is now leading the southbound Housatonic train NX12.
I need about 20.
The original Housatonic Railroad was chartered in 1836. The line started at Bridgeport, Connecticut, and was completed to State Line in Massachusetts in 1842. By 1845, expansion continued as two railroads were leased in Massachusetts, including the Berkshire and West Stockbridge Railroad. Then in 1847, they completed the rail line north into Pittsfield. In 1892, the Housatonic was leased by and became part of the New Haven Railroad, and for the next 77 years ran as their Berkshire division. Continuing this line's history, in 1969, the New Haven was merged into the Penn Central and became their Pittsfield branch. In 1976, this line was not part of the creation of Conrail, and the southern trackage was sold to the state of Connecticut, and the Massachusetts trackage was acquired by the Boston and Maine. Today's Housatonic Railroad was formed in 1983 when they leased the Connecticut trackage from the state, and then later purchased the Massachusetts trackage in 1991 from Guilford Transportation. The new Housatonic Railroad was formed in 1983. They began as a tourist line operating out of the Canaan Depot, and then in 1989 became a common carrier and began hauling freight cars from Canaan going south to the Conrail interchange at New Milford. By 1993, they ended tourist operations and concentrated solely on their freight business. Soon after crossing the Massachusetts state line, the Housatonic's NX-12 is arriving back in North Canaan, Connecticut with CSX interchange cars from Pittsfield. Over its 176-year history, the Housatonic Railroad has been a busy freight main line, an important passenger route for New Yorkers going into Massachusetts to vacation destinations, and also a tourist railroad. This railroad gets its name from the Housatonic River, as the Housatonic 74-mile Berkshire main line runs parallel to much of its route along that scenic river. Regular passenger service here at the Canaan Union Station ended in 1971 after the creation of Amtrak. The depot was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1972. With a new crew on board, the evening train departs Canaan as Housatonic train NX-13 and will work south overnight to the end of the line. Some of the main commodities transported by the Housatonic Railroad include lumber, pulp and paper, waste, aggregates, brick and building materials, plastics, chemicals, food and agricultural products, along with numerous general merchandise. We hope you have enjoyed this look at New England Shortline and Regional Railroads Volume 3, and look for new and exciting railroad video entertainment coming your way soon from Plets Express.
Do you know what this symbol means? I'm Officer Gerald Von Ray of the Eau Claire Police Department.
Operation Lifesaver wants to remind you to educate your children to never play near the railroad tracks or equipment, and always stop, look, listen, and think before you cross the tracks. If a train is approaching, never try to beat it at the crossing. Allow yourself plenty of time to cross. A train may be traveling faster than it appears, and a train can't stop in time to avoid collisions.
Operation Lifesaver wants you to be safe, so look, listen, and live.